So I was really privileged to serve on the steering committee, still serve on the steering committee for CAPItello-291, a randomized Phase III trial that looked at an AKT inhibitor, Capivasertib, in combination with Fulvestrant versus placebo in combination with Fulvestrant in a patient population who progressed on aromatase inhibitors with metastatic hormone receptor positive breast cancer with or without prior CDK4/6 inhibitors, which were not required in the study, but were seen in more than 50%, a majority of patients that received CDK4/6 inhibitors. And that data, which was presented by Nick Turner at San Antonio 2022, is actually very interesting. So, the clinical situation in this second or greater line setting is that patients who have progressed on their CDK4/6 inhibitor and endocrine therapy, or endocrine therapy where CDK4/6 inhibitors aren't available, based on the data we have so far from the oral SERD trials, they actually have a pretty short progression-free survival on Fulvestrant as a single agent. And we know that there are acquired mutations with increased resistance, such as mutations in the PI3 kinase pathway or the AKT pathway. So there was a previous Phase II randomized trial called FAKTIon, where initially it appeared that the addition of Capivasertib to Fulvestrant improved PFS and OS in the whole population. But it turned out that they were using an assay which really didn't pick up most of the pathway alterations. So when they improved the assay and reanalyzed the results with the new data, it looked as though Capivasertib was primarily effective in the patients who had pathway alterations, and that was defined as an activating PIK3CA mutation, an AKT mutation, or loss of PTEN, the tumor suppressor gene. So for CAPItello-291, it already had been designed when we got those updated data from FAKTIon. So the trial actually was redesigned in order to have an analysis of the pathway altered population as well as the intent to treat population that included the non-altered population. So the trial actually showed remarkable efficacy from Capivasertib with very modest toxicity. So progression-free survival was significantly improved in the intent to treat group with an almost doubling in the progression-free survival. And we still saw that same kind of crummy 3+ month PFS for Fulvestrant alone, hazard ratio 0.6. And in the altered pathway population, again, including all those 3 different alterations, the hazard ratio was even better at 0.5. So that was also very encouraging, a big difference in PFS in a patient population who generally doesn't do as well or respond as well or as long to treatment in the second-line setting. So that's very good. And then, the question really is what happens in the non-altered population. So they included in the non-altered population the group of patients who had unknown. So because they collected tumor tissue, some of the tumor tissue didn't arrive, or it wasn't, there wasn't any tumor in it, or it didn't have analyzable cells. So there was a percentage of patients, about 16%, who had uninformative tissue analysis. So we don't know if they were positive or negative. They're added into the non-altered population, and it appears that those patients benefited also, which is pretty striking because, we've seen for alpelisib, the alpha-specific PI3 kinase path inhibitor, that it only works in patients who have PIK3CA mutations. So, we, of course, looked at toxicity to try and also understand the benefits. And there were some patients who dose reduced, held the drug, and discontinued due to side effects. But it was markedly lower than what we've seen for the PI3 kinase only pathway inhibitors. So hyperglycemia grade 3 was seen in just over 2%. And that was very encouraging because we don't like dealing with hyperglycemia. There was more grade 1 and 2, but it was very tolerable. And then diarrhea and rash were the most common toxicities, but they were generally low grade. There was a 12% rate of grade 3 rash overall, so it's still something we have to manage, and we have to manage the diarrhea. Capivasertib is given in intermittent dosing, so it's not given continuously, so each week you take it, you have a few days off, which really makes a big difference, I think, in tolerance. So we're very excited to see this data. Overall survival is still immature, but there are more events in the control arm than there are in the Capivasertib arm, so it's very encouraging. Obviously, there'll be additional analyses, but it is, I think, an encouraging step to newer targeted agents in this setting. And of course, the next step is going to be to try and understand combinations with oral SERDs and to expand the use of this drug into even potentially earlier lines of hormone receptor positive disease, and hopefully to better understand the efficacy in the non-altered population. And we'll see where the regulatory approval is in 2023, but hopefully we'll get cell-free DNA results that may give us informative genomics in the entire population or most of the population, and will answer the question about that unknown population.